Welcome to the Savage Nation. Well, we turn off the Gregorian chants and we turn on the Michael rants. And today's topic is the mass hypnosis, the mass hysteria that's going on in this country. Today, of course, being Super Bowl Sunday, I doubt very many people will be listening to this program. Their minds are only on the game, the big game, which is the religion of our time. It's replaced, in many ways, replaced everything. It's replaced all thought. The big game. Now, I don't knock it. I just not that interested in it. I was in a supermarket yesterday checking out late at night. It was after dinner, about 8:30. I went to buy some stuff for breakfast, and young guy, cashier, kid, maybe 20, 22. He said, "You're going to watch the game? You're looking forward to the game tomorrow?" And instead of putting it down, I said, "I'm not that interested in sports, not really." And I said to him, "Are you?" He said, "Oh, yes." He said, "I have the day off, and I'm looking forward to it. I even have Monday off." I said, "That's beautiful. Are you with friends?" He said, "Yes." And I left it at that. Now, I could care less about most sports, not all, but most. They don't interest me that much. But this mass hypnosis is what interests me today. And it leads me to today's question. We've heard it 1,000 times, the phrase, "Is God dead?" I don't want to beat that one up. But I decided to change it to something different, which is religion dead? Because God can exist and religion could not. In other words, the religions can disappear, but there will always be the eternal God. Or if you're a pagan gods, if you're one of the monotheistic believers, as I am, there's only one true God. If you're a Christian, you believe that Jesus is the Son of God. If you're Jew, you believe there is a God, one God, only God. If you're a Muslim, I don't know what you believe. I asked that question. Some said it's to achieve heaven through good deeds on the earth. I hope to God that's what most Muslims believe. And in my experience, it is. Unfortunately, most of the world is not experiencing that aspect of that religion. They're experiencing the jihad to convert the rest of the world to a caliphate. But I'm not here to discuss politics. I'm here to discuss one question only, which is religion dead? Now, the answer is, of course, it's not completely dead, but it's dying. It's dying in the West, for sure. It's been on a steady decline for centuries, and perhaps in the future it will disappear, perhaps completely, except in some corners of the earth. And why is that? I think it's because as scientific understanding expands, the answers that religion gave people continue to shrink. So if you look at the Old Testament, there are many prayers about agriculture. God give us the dew, God give us the rain, that kind of thing. And so the ancient Israelites needed religion to explain natural events that they didn't understand, and they thought by praying to the Almighty God, he could make rainfall during a time of drought. They didn't understand thunderstorm. They didn't understand disease. They didn't understand the origins of life. Do we? I don't know. Maybe you do. Maybe you don't. So we have a lot of answers based on scientific evidence. And fewer of us need to turn to religious explanations. And so with every scientific breakthrough, with every one of them, and there have been enormous breakthroughs, religious explanations have diminished in their power and lost their credibility. The more people understand the world through science, the less they rely on faith, period. There's also a great shift in cultural and social values. Do I have to tell you that? Do I have to say internet? There are people who say they don't read books because books are for stupid people and slow people. And they're called influencers, morons. Total morons. They think they know everything because they have an iPhone in their hand and they fly in a private jet. But the world is changing, isn't it? Human rights have taken on a new meaning. Rigid gender roles have changed, whether you want to accept it or not. The patriarchy is no longer accepted in most Western civilized societies. To be very frank, a lot of women detest the patriarchal aspect of religion. And they don't like the idea that only men can be in charge of the religious service. Should they? Should only men be in charge? Why? Then there's technology, the global connectivity, which are accelerating the decline of religion. In the past, religious beliefs or religion itself was reinforced because people lived in small, isolated communities where everyone shared the same faith, whether it was a small village in Ukraine 100 years ago, to give an example, or in Poland. Today, that person in Poland or Ukraine sees things that open them up to ideas and beliefs way beyond the village. Moreover, religious claims are more easily debunked, and alternative worldviews are becoming far more appealing. Social media, digital communications, has created a skepticism which has emerged more rapidly than has an increased faith. There are people who have no belief in God or religion who are very moral, who are actually happy. And they don't need religion to be happy or to be moral. And then there are some on the other side, just to make, the reducto ad absurdum argument, there are some very dogmatic religious people who are miserable and are amoral in their religion. So where does that leave you? Fear. Fear drives a lot of us. Tradition will come back to us in times of need. When you're on a gurney being wheeled into a surgical ward after a heart attack, you'll find God again. If you're in a cancer ward and you've been a secular humanist, but you're suffering and screaming out who you're screaming out to, you're going to beg God. You're going to beg God. I got chills up my spine when I said that because I know someone's suffering right now in that way. He's one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. Why did God punish him this way? I don't know. It's making me question everything all over again. Why did he get this kind of cancer? While some bastards on the earth don't even get a headache. So I don't have an answer when I say the question today is religion dead? Of course it's not dead. But religions have certainly diminished in most parts of the world as a driving force in that society. If you go to Israel, for example, most of the people are not even religious. Most of you people who don't know Israel at all should go there once before you make statements about religion and Jews and people in Israel. You got to go there to find out. Most people don't believe in religion in Israel. They're not religious. In fact, the ultra-religious in Israel are anathema to the secular humanists in Israel. They fight with each other. But if you look at history, religions are not permanent. Thousands of belief systems that you never heard of that were once dominant have completely disappeared. Ancient gods that were worshipped for centuries, those of ancient Greece, Rome, and Egypt, are now considered myths. Christianity and Islam today may seem immutable and untouchable, but so did the religions that came before them. Every religion eventually declines when it fails to adapt, and modern religions are no different. Christianity itself adapted, by the way, to other religions at the time. I could go into the whole idea of Mithrasism, and how the birth date of Jesus was invented completely in order to co-opt the whole thing, the holiday of Mithras. But that's not an important point right now. But we know that secular humanism, atheism, agnosticism are rising, and that the deep religions of the past are not necessarily an inevitable part of our future as a species. Will religion disappear entirely? No, it's actually growing in some parts of the world. It's growing in Africa. Why is Islam growing so rapidly? Is it a superior religion? Well, no, it appeals to people with almost no education by and large. I'm sorry to say it. I met some nice Muslim people, and just like you and I, most of them, they want to be left alone, raise their families, go to work and make a living and be as honest as they can. Unfortunately, there's a sect of Islam called Wahhabism that believes in conquering everyone else around them and converting them to a giant caliphate. So I did a piece during COVID on social control, and I talked about how the witch doctor in villages was using the supernatural as a form of social control, and I compared the witch doctor to the COVID doctors back in 2020. I was the only one who understood it from a cultural, sociological point of view, perhaps as my background in anthropology, along the road of many other studies, living in villages. And so the fact was, as I said, it was about social control, witchcraft and social control. And unfortunately, the science was distorted in 2020 by people like Fauci, who's still not, how can we hear about arrests and this and that? The guy's done more damage than most people on the planet. Why is he scot-free? I know he was given a pardon by Biden. So I don't want to get trapped into the political right now. That's just a sand trap on this golf course of today. So this witchcraft and social control is very important for us to understand. And the more people are free to explore ideas on their own and to study real science in many different areas, the less they need traditional organized religion, by the way. And people would rather be free in their own mind. They'd rather have a free will and a free mind to make up their own decisions. When we have a crisis, though, who do we turn to? Say you're out on a nice day on your boat, and the boat is unsinkable. Nothing could go wrong. It's got everything. It's got great, what do you call those, pumps down below. I have them on my boat. Sometimes I don't think of every part. Bilge pumps. The most powerful bilge pumps in the world, and the hull is a double hull. And you go out of the Golden Gate, for, let's say, on a small pleasure boat, and you're unsinkable. You're heading out to the Farallon Islands for the day. And you have a nice time outside the Farallon Islands, and then you're coming back, and it's several hours back, about 2 hours back, even on a fast power boat. And then you get under the Golden Gate Bridge, and suddenly you look behind you, and there's a 20-foot following sea. And you realize if you don't know how to pilot that boat, you're going to sink. That following sea will swamp your boat, and you'll go under. It happened to me when I bought a new Grand Banks in 2002. I thought the boat was just the most wonderful thing I ever owned. I had owned single-engine boats before of narrow, small keels, like bayliners. And I was told that when you get a big Grand Banks with a deep keel and big bronze propellers with two powerful engines, you're going to see a difference that you can't believe. And it was true. So I didn't pay much attention to the following sea. When I turned around and I looked behind me and I saw a 20-foot following sea, I knew at that moment, although I had not studied any books on it, my instincts kicked in, and I knew how to surf the wave intuitively. Had I not known it and I did the wrong thing, I could have sunk that boat with everyone on it. Now, did I turn to God at that moment? Not at the moment. I was too involved with saving my ass and saving the people on the boat to turn to God and pray. I just decided to surf the wave under the gate. What's the point? In times of crisis, we don't always turn to God. You know, the statement, are there any atheists in a foxhole? I've said earlier, are there no atheists in a cancer ward? Go and watch a mother, your wife, if you're a guy, give birth. That's what you have to do. You won't understand what I'm talking about until you've seen one of your children being born. And once you see your wife giving birth to your child, you'll understand God. You can't understand it any other way if you're a young man. You're filled only with yourself. When you see that miracle of life, you'll understand that God exists. Now, did I say religion exists? No, I said God exists. And that's the whole point of today's discussion, which is religion dead? No, religion's not dead, but it's dying in most parts of the world, except in, let's say, the most primitive areas on earth. It's not really growing. I know in America, we got churches that are big and all, and God bless people who believe in God and all of that and go to the church. I've been in a synagogue with 5,000 Jews praying at 777 Eastern Parkway. Some of them are highly educated people. They're not all dummies. Okay, so believe me, I understand the subtleties of this discussion. Einstein said that the more he studied the perimeters of the universe, the less he understood, and the more he believed that there had to be a master creator, a God, not a God, God. The great Einstein understood that, one of the great thinkers of all time. And every one of us comes to God one way or the other. I told you in my book, God, Faith, and Reason, there's a great piece in there. I'm having it reprinted, by the way. I don't have it handy. I'm sorry. A Jewish gangster finds God. This guy was a murderer. Not just a swindler. He was a killer. And as tough as nails. He grew up in a tough neighborhood, and he had to kill to survive. Anyway, it's a long story. He's an actual person. I had him on my radio show. He wrote some articles that were published widely in magazines. I forget his name. And he said, you need to be broken before you find God, or God will break you. I'll never forget that, because that'll humble you more than anything. Remember, no matter how proud you may be, you're going to be broken in this life unless you understand you're not God. You have to come to understand you are not God. That's called humility. Where does the word humility come from? Humus. Think about the word humility. Oh, he's not a humble guy. What does that mean? Humus. It means to get down to the earth, close to the earth. Humus. That's really the derivation of it, in my mind. I don't want to go into the etymology of the word humility, but that's related to the word humus, close to earth, close to dirt, remembering that what we are made of and that we're not immortal. That's basically humility. That changes you. And that's why seeing your child being born will make you a humble person. You'll realize that you were born also, that you didn't come out of the air. So it leads us back to the question of, is religion dead? It's not dead, but it certainly is changing and dying in many ways. Let's say in our country, let's stick to America or the West. Do you have to go to Sweden, Norway, Denmark, some of the most advanced civil societies on the planet, and ask yourself what happened to the churches that were once full? Why have they emptied out? And who's filling the void in those countries? Well, they invited in Muslims who are trying to take over their countries. The secular humanists in Denmark, Norway, Sweden, etc., the Nordic countries, created by Vikings who are murderers and thieves. They invaded other countries and stole everything they could, turned people into slaves. And now these Nordic countries have become enslaved themselves by their own secular humanism. And the irony here is that they invited in people who are going to enslave them again in their own country. They can't even defend their own nation, defend their own women. But that's sort of a side circus going on. Let's go back to the main tent. And before I conclude, because I'm not going to be here for the whole day, after all, I don't have a game to watch, but I know you do. Religion's primary function, what is it? I said earlier, it's social control, rather than just explaining the unknown. But it's not an exclusive function in modern societies. We have secular governments, separation of church and state, right? We have legal systems. We have ethical frameworks. And they have taken over the role that religion once played in enforcing moral norms. But If you study law, if you study ethics, you'll find that they're based on religious doctrine almost entirely. They didn't come out of the air. So if you look at democracies with strong institutions and high levels of education, we see that societies such as ours do not require religion for social cohesion, but we have no social cohesion. Why is there no social cohesion in America? Why is there no social cohesion in America today? Because the melting pot has become the chamber pot. Whereas in the past, people came to this nation and to the melting pot, and most people wanted to and became Americans. They shaved their beards and they wanted to be an American. I haven't shaved my beard completely. It's only halfway shaven. I'm not fully emerged yet as a modern man. But when a crisis comes along, earthquakes, tornadoes, storms, war, who do people turn to? You're not going to turn to secular humanism for your answers. What about an economic downturn? What if we had another Great Depression? What about the political instability that we see today in Minneapolis, where the radical left is on the warpath? What are we going to do about that? How will that cancer be stopped? We know that religious affiliation, even in our country, which has largely been a religious country, is dropping at an accelerating rate, except in some areas. Don't disagree with me just to be disagreeable. So what's replacing religion in our country? Political systems are replacing religion. For example, the left believes in communism or Marxism, if you want to put it in a simplistic term. It could be Maoism. It could be the other son of a gun who I've written about, Lenin. Not necessarily Marxism. It's a catch-all phrase today. Marx was only one of the leading thinkers of communism, of the economic system of communism. But you had Lenin, you had Trotsky, and you had the others, and there are people who were Trotskyites, Leninites, etc., Maoists. So it's not just Marxism, and they're replacing the religious. Okay, so this little book was once the Bible of the Chinese during the mass murder of Mao Zedong, who killed 30 million of his fellow Chinese. One of the greatest horrors in human history was created by this psychotic madman, the People's Army, things like that. You got to read this to understand that this mass murderer must be read in his own words to understand how communism can destroy the entire world. That is why we went to war 3 times against communists. People much smarter than you and I understood this. Today, they've lost it. And they based the whole thing on classes and class struggle. Exactly what the vermin on the left are trying to introduce into this country today, whether it's occasional cortex or that really evil one is Mom's dummy, because he's a combination of communism and the radical Islamism that is a curse upon the earth, 2 cancers. And yet they voted for the animal over there. I know how that's going to end, though. I've studied enough history to know that this loudmouth college teacher, this little college professor, Mamdani, will eventually meet his end. It will not go good for him, not go well for him. This can't go on forever. The revolutionary fervor that he expresses, and it sounds so hollow every time he talks. And Mamdani the other day talks about how great Islam is, and Islam is a religion of immigration. He's a liar. Not only is he a thief, but a liar. He says Muhammad left one city and went to another. He didn't leave it. He was kicked out. He was thrown out of the country. He didn't leave it on parade. He was thrown out of the country. That's why he left to Medina. So be very careful what you fall for, because communism is a replacement for religion. People say, well, religion has caused so many deaths, we'd be better off with communism. Well, which death do you want? Which death do you want? The religious death, or do you want a sociopathic death? It's crazy. You get rid of religion, you replace it with a state religion called communism. That's what the left is in America today. So before you embrace this idea that, yes, it's a pox upon all of us, religion should be dead, God should be dead, and we want to worship communism where everyone's equals. Never worked in history, never will work in history. Mao Zedong killed 30 million of his fellow Chinese, as I said to you before. You got to read some of the Chinese who lived through it to understand what this means. So now we have another phenomenon in America, which is tribal identity, which can emerge and manifest in secular or quasi-religious ideologies. Tribal identities can manifest, as they are in America today, in secular or quasi-religious ideologies, but it does not equate a return to organized religion as it existed in the past. You see, it's two different things. People have lost faith in science after COVID, even though science didn't disappear. Thieves dressed as scientists destroyed a faith in science. You know what I'm saying to you? But science itself is not evil. It's like you say, well, I don't believe in Catholicism because of all the molesters. Well, the number of priests who molest children or molested children is small but significant, but they don't represent Christianity, you see, any more than Fauci represented science, or the other bad people during COVID who vaccinated hordes and hordes of people, causing crippling damage. It doesn't mean that they did it for good. They may have done it for the profit of the company making the vaccine, right? So science is not losing its grip on public consciousness. It's just that a few bad people posing as scientists have destroyed a faith in science per se. I have always found science to be my refuge. In fact, when I'm adrift sometimes in thought, there's nothing more clarifying and sobering than reading an actual scientific article in a science journal. Not a digest of a science journal, but an actual study, a double-blinded study, and reading it in great detail, you know, the methods and the analysis and how it was done. It's sobering, it's clarifying. Bertrand Russell, one of my heroes, who wrote philosophy and science, also wrote Principia Mathematica. And he, of course, was an utter rationalist who believed that mathematics for him was the closest he could come to understanding the world through mathematics. And those who are mathematicians would agree with him that the purest form of understanding we have on the planet is through mathematics. I've heard that said, and I'm not a mathematician, by the way, but I understand it. I remember when I was, this is a long story. I don't know if I want to get distracted, but many of you like this. Is when I get distracted. I had left for a summer to travel in Europe for a couple of months. I don't know when it was, after college, before, I don't remember. And I came back a totally different person. A sort of a poetic, beatniky kind of guy, you know, grew my hair long. Beatles were in force. And I remember my girlfriend at the time, when I arrived on the ship, she broke into tears because she knew I wasn't the same person. I don't know why she cried. She just looked at me and started to cry. I don't think she was crying because I was back. We never really got back together again. I was just a kid at the time. But she looked at me and broke into tears. Women are very intuitive. She knew I was no longer the same person. And so I took weird jobs. I needed a job. I remember it was between semesters or a summer. I didn't have any school. I don't remember when. I took a job. I try to find myself again as a youngster. It was the sufferings of young Werther phase. Read Goethe to understand that one, where every 18-year-old goes through this terrible atheistic phase, the sufferings of young Werther. It's a normal phase for teenagers, late teenagers, to go through. I took a job in a morgue at Queens General Hospital. And you say, well, how'd that happen? I just wanted I wanted to see something I'd never understand. I didn't understand life and death. So I went in the morgue, and this huge red brick building with a huge chimney up there on Parsons Boulevard, I think, I don't remember. So I'm working in the morgue, and they're doing autopsies on the dead. They had to do autopsies on unexplained deaths. So I remember I saw 3 autopsies. And I had never seen anything like this in my life. They gave me a job. The doctor in charge, the pathologist, gave me a mop. And he said, your job is to mop the floor after we finish the autopsy. Nice job, huh? All right. First autopsy was a beautiful child, 5 years old, blue eyes, blonde hair. No one knew why he died. I looked at this child. There was not a mark on his body. Sudden death syndrome? Don't know. Next person dead was a middle-aged man, tall, white man. No marks on his body, dead. Next one was an elderly black lady, obese. And as they were performing the autopsy, this is, you're not going to believe this story. They had to cut her skull to remove her brain, to look at the brain. I never saw anything as horrible in my whole life. And as this pathologist was cutting with a saw, he was smoking and the ashes were falling on the corpse. I swear to God. It was so horrible that I quit on the spot. I put down my mop and I said, I'm going. I had a bye, doc, and I left. That was step one of my, the Steppenwolf of my understanding of life. Did I understand more about life at that time? I don't know. I knew I didn't want to work in the field of morgues. I learned that. That definitely was not a career for me. But I did some other things during that weird summer to try and understand life. And I don't know what I learned. I can't remember exactly. I don't know what other odd jobs I took. That was, I would say, the epitome of horror to see that. But I dwelled in other areas. I delved into other areas as well. I got much deeper into music. I got much deeper into poetry and literature and such. And of course, at that time, got much deeper into science and scientific inquiry. I just fell in love with science, became my outlet. When I couldn't find any answers anywhere else, I found that the clean river, the clean stream of science was my salvation. And I knew that that would be my future, would be to study and understand things. I recall one other thing that I was getting at. In that summer, I took a course in logic and scientific method at the City University of New York. It was a summer class, and we were studying Plato. And we had to translate one of the Platonic dialogues into mathematical formulae. It was so advanced in thinking. It was so beautiful. And then you saw that this dialogue was written with such utter logic, which the Greeks brought to the world. The Greeks gave us logic and scientific method. And that's when I realized that if we don't know what's going on, by using pure logic, we can arrive at the truth or get close to the truth. We may never arrive at the total truth, but we can arrive, we can travel. Let's say travel to the truth. Do any of us get there? I don't know. Have you gotten to the truth in your life? I haven't, but I do know that in the liberal democracy, so-called, that we're living in, with absolute individual freedom, there's almost no truth whatsoever. Everything is a lie. Everything's a sham. Everything's a con. Everything's a screwing. No one knows what to believe in. People have no faith whatsoever in their fellow man. They all know everyone's a liar and they're being screwed from top to bottom. That's all they know. So they have no faith at all. And so where do they turn? I don't know. It's up to you to decide where to turn in a time like this. You can't believe in anything. America lost its religion. Now what? Who do you believe in now? You believe in Donald Trump? You believe in a Democrat, Gavin Newsom? Who do you believe in? Anyone you disagree with is a fascist. Everyone you disagree with is Hitler. Right out of the playbook of the 1930s in Germany, everyone pointing their finger. Everyone's a Nazi to the left. They don't look in a mirror. But the reason religion will never disappear completely, even in a modern secular liberal society, is because there's always questions that science cannot answer. I'll give you one. Where does the universe come from? Where do you go when you die? Where do you go when you die? Does it mean the end of you? Can you contemplate a thing like that? A friend of mine texted me today from another country. He's traveling. Of course, I won't mention his name. It's private. And he mentioned some famous blogger. Never heard of the guy. I won't mention him. I don't know who he is. And he says, a guy says he doesn't believe in reading or in books. He says he's too smart to read books. Books are for slow brains. And he's got a lot of followers. It just shows you how stupid people can be, even with a lot of followers. So when I have questions, I turn back to God and my own religion. And then I read, like an ancient rabbi wrote this: wealth can be heaven or hell. For those who hold on to it, it is hell. For those who know how to give it away, it is heaven. It's a simple statement, for example. I find the ancients, the great ones, were very wise. I remember when I was younger and studying French philosophy, I used to love to read the maxims of, I forget what they were called, one of the French philosophers, Ideologies, one of the French philosophers. And he wrote maxims, which were short. They were like tweets in his day. A maxim was a tweet, short but concise statements. I love them. They were the early tweets. Maxims were early tweets in French philosophy. I forget who was the biggest tweeter of his time in the 17th century. Or was it the 18th century? I always liked maxims. And so that's where we are today. Will science ever tell us where the universe comes from? Will science ever tell us what happens to us after we die? No. You have to turn to God and religion in order to get the answer. If not religion, then to God himself. You have to understand that there's going to come a time in your life. If you're an older person, I don't have to explain this to you. If you're a younger person who happens to be stumbled upon this guy in a weird hat, you don't understand that certain things cannot be understood by logic or reason alone. And you're going to have to turn back to the religion of your ancestors. At some point in your life, mark my words, let's say you're 22 years old and you just stumbled on me. Who does this guy? I don't know. I like his tie, but what the hell is that Napoleon behind him? And what's that dummy next to him? What's that tie? What's he talking about? You don't understand a lot of what I'm saying, but there's going to come a day in your life, no matter how smart and immortal you may think you are, that you're going to have to turn back to the religion of your ancestors. It's going to happen to you 100%, as sure as I'm sitting here. One day you're going to be alone somewhere, and you're going to turn to the religion of your fathers. So maybe you want to learn a little bit about it so you know which way to turn. And that's about it, folks. This is Michael Savage. And there's always more to say on this topic. But with God's will and your listenership, Mike shall return. Now get ready for that big game. Make sure to eat the worst poison you could possibly eat today and drink as much garbage as you can drink. Smoke that toxic cannabis and cheer your team on. And that's it. Thank you for listening. With God's will and your listenership, I shall return. I always search around for the end button and it gets blocked behind my speaker. It's hiding. There it is. I'll have to end it again now. With God's will and your listenership,